You're listening to the Cantina Cast, your home for thought-provoking Star Wars talk. Join Albert and Jonesy in breaking down the latest news, trailers, movies, and of course, your favorite characters from a galaxy far, far away.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Cantina Cast. My name is Albert Padilla, and this is episode 344, Listener Questions, Mandalorian Edition, Mando Edition, take your pick. We're back after nearly 8 months. We were just doing, right before we came on the air, Jonesy and I were looking at the calendar, I was like, wow, we haven't really done one of these in so long. I knew it had been a while, but I didn't realize it had been to the tune of 8 months. But we are glad to be back, and speaking of Jonesy, welcome to the show, sir. How are you doing tonight?
Doing great, man. How are you?
Doing pretty good. Fancy shirt you got there. Does that say Earglue Media on it?
Yeah, I got to fly the colors. So.
Yeah. Wow. Company man.
No, well, yeah, you got to pay the bills somehow, and that's the only way I get a paycheck. That's zero.
Right. We get nothing for this, by the way.
We get the
pleasure.
We don't even get adjuration. We just get the work.
Just get the work. No, we're great. We're grateful to be here. Grateful for everybody that supports the show, and grateful for all the questions that came in. It was an overwhelming amount of questions.
We had 40, I think.
We had to weed some out. Although some of these, I think we can probably get through pretty quickly. So we're going to try to keep the show to about an hour. That way you guys can go back to your normal, regularly scheduled program, AKA your families. And, hopefully if you got your question submitted, it will get an answer here or some semblance of an answer. How about that? We're not going to promise anything.
Right. And like Albert said last week, Patreons get kind of first privilege. So that we're going to start off with them. So if you're a Patreon, you're guaranteed to get your question on the air and get it answered poorly.
That's right.
But we're going to answer it in a way that Utini dislikes and disagrees with.
It's a guarantee every time.
Right. And for those that don't know, Utini is a Patreon member, but also very active in Discord, and he likes to remind us of the things that we might miss or didn't consider. Those are really nice ways of saying, here's all the things you got wrong.
You're right. He's also a friend. We got to meet.
Oh yeah, we love him to death.
So.
Yeah, we got to see him in Chicago and everything was really cool. So
yep,
we'd like giving him a hard time.
Yes, because he gives us a hard time. As a reminder, when we get to the very bottom, I'll announce who won the. No, you don't get to ask the question now, Bo Fisher. Go away. It's too late. You missed the deadline. But just kidding. So if we get the winner of the, what did we call this? I don't know what we're calling it yet. Listener choice. So we took one of the questions. And we're going to turn that into a full-fledged episode, not 345, which is the next one, but 346. We'll come back and do that. So we'll announce it at the very end who the winner was of that question. That'll be turned into a show as well.
We'll have to come up with something clever.
I know. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe we'll just name it after the person. How about that?
Ooh, that might work.
Maybe. We can do whatever we want. All right, let's get into this because we got a lot of questions here. Do you want to take the first question or ask the first question?
I'll kick it off here. So Lucid Truth, again, Patreon member. Do you think it's weird how at the beginning of the Clone Wars that the Mandalorians were peaceful and there was only a small band of warriors? And by the end, there seems to be thousands fighting at the siege. And now with the Mandalorian, there's almost no mention of them being peaceful. Maybe this pacifist time under Satine was very short.
Yeah. All right. So I think, so the question is, well, what's the question? I guess, is it whether or not the peaceful time of the Mandalorians was short? I think by all accounts it was. And so I'll get to that, but let me back up and do a little bit I'll do some math in here as well. So by the time the Clone Wars starts, right, Satine is already in power. She came into power just before, was it Phantom Menace? Somewhere around there.
Yeah,
like the Battle of Naboo, somewhere around there, right? Battle of Naboo. So that would have been 32 BBY is when she kind of came in. Now, prior to that, they were always aggressive, and it's everything that we know the Mandalorians to be from Legends and for what little we knew in canon. So she comes into power in 32 BBY. By the time she dies in the Clone Wars, it's just like it's been 13 years, right? So total that they were, quote, peaceful. So in the grand scheme of like the Mandalorian lore, which we know goes thousands upon thousands of years back, much like the Jedi, yeah, that's a blip on the radar. That's not even like markable or traceable in any ways. It's a very, very short period of time. To get back to the original part of the question, there really aren't in the Clone Wars. Yeah, there are a lot of we don't see a lot of Mandalorians, but we're led to believe they've got this entire planet of them, right? And at some point they are scattered out when the Empire comes in and Darth Maul comes in, kills Satine. At that point, they all leave. And so some of them end up going to the moon of Concordia. I think that's where they were supposed to all go, is to Concordia. Yeah. But we know like Death Watch went on to the moon of Karlak. They went to the moon of Zanbar at some point. They were kind of jumping around. And Death Watch, I mean, there were other clans, but Death Watch was kind of like the primary one that we focused on simply because, well, they were the first one to be introduced, and then later on they got picked up with Darth Maul. But we know that they were kind of scattered at that point all over the place. And then they all came back, some of them came back anyways, when we get to Star Wars Rebels, and they take favor with the Empire. That's where Gar Saxon came in. And there's a good question that kind of picks up right at that point. But as far as whether or not there were hundreds or thousands of them, I mean, I suppose so, but they probably came from all over the place at that point to fight for Mandalore. There may have been some that were pacifists that were kind of on the fence. They decided to go the pacifist route. Hey, that didn't work out so well. We're going to go back to our roots, and maybe they're now, warriors. But yeah, I mean, it is probably a little jarring, but if you get caught up in the numbers, but I think that's kind of at least what they were trying to show you, is that they went everywhere, they came back, they fought, they lost, and now they're completely decimated for the most part, from what we see in The Mandalorian.
Right. So, lucid truth, do we think it's weird? Yes.
Yeah, was that the question? Thank you very much.
That was the first part. There was a lot of parts. Yeah, and to go on with that, it's difficult to really tell numbers in general.
Yeah.
With the different shows, and each show takes a bit of liberty with what they want to present with whatever the environment they have. And so I think it's it's one of these evolving things of whatever fits it, and we have to use a bit of headcanon because we're not getting Mandalorian books, really. Comic books, regular books, we're really not getting much of any of it, are we?
Mm. Right.
And it doesn't much. And there doesn't seem to be anything coming out. So it's difficult to answer that because we just don't know where everyone was. And I'm a bit with Albert, probably scattered. And of course, now we definitely know they're scattered and their numbers are few, or at least it's perceived that they're few. And again, if there's these cells, cumulatively, we might see 1,000 or something like that, but probably not a planet full, like Albert was saying.
Yeah. So 13 years, that's all you got. So fun ride while it lasted.
Right.
All right. Next question is, it's from your buddy, Mr. Terrence, Tflu44. He's an avid fan of The Basement too. So thank you very much, Mr. Terrence. Do you think The Mandalorian will ever have direct tie-in or mention of anything that happened or is going to happen from any of the films? For example, mention of Luke or Leia, or something like a rumor of Starkiller Base, or whatever you guys can think of.
I think Starkiller is interesting because we know that's not far removed from where we're at with Mandalorian.
Mm-hmm.
So that's very possible. I think, I guess if you're speaking movies directly, Starkiller, maybe some of the characters from Starkiller, but it's difficult to see if there's any other really hard connection where you almost have a paths crossing arbitrarily, or a Luke or something like that mentioned. It's always possible. I just don't think it has anything. I don't think you really need it in the story. Maybe with Yoda, or not Yoda, with the child rather. Maybe with the child, you might have some of that with a movie type of character. I think there might be a question later on, but that's probably more likely to pull a character from the TV show. Of course, we already know what's happening, and maybe other shows from TV shows, from Filoni's body of work, rather than from the movie body of work. And this is just kind of precedence. We don't see a lot of tie-in between the movies and really much of anything. We've had a few here and there. We've not had things conflict with it necessarily, but we don't always have this direct connection, although we're Star Wars fans. We can make it connect to anything.
Oh, yeah. And sometimes, and there's absolutely no proof of it. We just like to say that there was, or in our heads, that's how it played out. So I would agree. I think we do. And Jonesy, you hit on a couple things. And so let me take one step back or one step to the side on this question. We got a lot of questions. Like, there were a lot of them around, do you think we'll see this, right, in season 2? There were a lot of questions around that. So I'm going to apologize up front if we kind of come back to that and repeat some of the same things. But it seemed like that's where a lot of everyone's interest really was. So,
right.
The question of whether or not we're going to see those things is, I think, very possible. Maybe we get there's been speculation around the trailer and whether or not that's Red 5. If it's Red 5, then it can probably, 99% chance that it's going to be Luke Skywalker, and that's R2-D2. And I'll come back to exactly how I would like to see that if we did a little bit later. Or did we take that question out? I forget now. But anyway, if not, I'll come back to here in a second. So that's one. But the other things are like, Boba Fett, we've talked about that and speculated that to probably no end at this point. The Great Pit of Carkoon, the Sarlacc Pit, that's probably a given if we go back to Tatooine. I don't know what else he would be going there for outside of what we think we know what happened to Boba Fett. So great possibility there. We've talked about Cobb Vanth as being a possibility of something that's happened. More interesting would be if they decided to go, and there's a question here about a deep cut, so I'm going to steal some of the thunder there, but what if they went back to, as he's going through and he's searching for the knowledge of the Jedi, and he really hasn't met up with Luke, he's not met up with Ahsoka, and he's just kind of doing this legwork on his own. I mean, what if he goes and runs into Mortis or the planet of Mortis, so he gets word of all of that, or maybe the world between worlds and some of the, maybe that before we see that in Rebels. It would be completely trippy at that point. And maybe that's how maybe that's what he uses to find his planet, or I don't know. This is all pure speculation, right? But that would be more interesting. I don't think they're going to go there, but it's Dave Filoni, so who knows?
Yeah, and again, largely focused around what from the films are we going to be able to pull from, and yeah, like you were alluding to with the Pit of Curcumin, it's going to be these kind of passing references, I think, for the most part.
Right.
I'd be very surprised if we got a very overt, direct, hard connection, rather than something is mentioned or we happen to be somewhere like what's developing in the Starkiller base and something like that. I think that's probably the most likely, though, of what we're seeing. Because again, they really want to sell the sequel trilogy, even still, and start to feel out Disney. I'm filling some gaps here, but Disney kind of wants to feel out, is there anything else that we can do with that in that field? And this can, kind of like the Aftermath books, you can put some building blocks here that you can then apply later on to what we've seen in the movies.
Yeah, I think it's about building relevance as well for the sequel trilogy.
Yeah.
Being able to kind of tie those two together, I think is important, and The Mandalorian can certainly do that in a lot of different ways. So those were a couple of things, I think, of things that happened in the past.
Well, and they keep borrowing from the past, to be fair. I mean, they tons of references to the original trilogy in particular. So it's right on the money, I think. Too.
Yeah.
Entirely
as far as things that could come, you mentioned Starkiller Base. I definitely think that's a possibility. I think the First Order beginnings would be very interesting to see, and specifically, and I'm going to say it, and I'll come back and say it a little bit later, but what if we did get mention of Snoke? What if he is the one that's pulling the strings for somebody like Gideon, right? And really, it's one and the same with Palpatine now at this point after the Rise of Skywalker.
Or
what
Hux,
or Hux, right? I had Brendel Hux on there as somebody that we could possibly see here at some point. And then maybe the cloning of Palpatine's body and all that. This all plays into the midichlorian theory, and we'll come back to that here in just a bit. But yeah, there's definitely there's some breadcrumbs here that we could pick up on for things yet to be seen in the sequel trilogy movies.
Yep. So thanks for the question, Terrence. All right, next one is For Malice, our buddy Twan.
Yep.
Quote unquote, Baby Yoda displays several force powers in season 1. From what we've seen in movies and by TV series rather, how to use the force is taught by a master. Being that Baby Yoda is 50 years old, is it possible that he was trained briefly before being captured? And who would it be? Who would it be? Sorry, let me do the enthusiasm that he put in here.
Yeah, that was a Skeletor. Who would it be? Yeah, boob. All right, so we know nothing. We don't know anything about the race, so it's really hard. We can fully speculate here as to whether or not someone did any kind of training with them. And we know, so using the force is kind of about two things, right? It's about control and it's about mastery, right? You've got to be able to control it. You've got to be able to master it in order to use it. And so for the sake of the question, if he was trained by somebody, there are a couple of possibilities, because if you think about, he was born 50 years ago, this would have put him right around the same time that Anakin was born. So we're at the height of, or just before the great fall of the Jedi Order. So take your pick in terms of who possibly could have trained him in the Jedi Council, Jedi Order. The question that I have, though, the thing I struggle with is, why would they have not identified him, right? If it's a known existing Jedi that did any kind of training for him, you would think their MO was to take those kids to the temple and start training them as younglings. Right. So why would they have not done that? But nonetheless, there are a whole lot of Jedi out there that could be training them. More interesting enough, and this kind of goes back to what we were saying earlier with tying these folks together. What if they did something like somebody from the High Republic, someone who used to be a Jedi, no longer is a Jedi, retired, whatever else, and there's some side story, and maybe that ties into the books. I'm probably thinking this a little too hard. I don't know that they're going to go there just yet, but right. It could be somebody like that maybe just another Jedi that we don't know of, who doesn't really have an allegiance to the existing Jedi Order. Maybe they fell out of good favor with them for whatever reason, and there's this child and all that, and they did train him. But I don't know that he has to have had a trainer at this point. You could just chalk it up to he's native, he's inherently powerful in the Force. We know he's not able to control it. There's a question a little bit later about why he faints. And, it could just be as simple as that that's where he's at right now.
Yeah, and I can see why Tuan looks at it this way, because what the child is doing looks very deliberate. He's putting his hand up. He's actually moving towards and attempting to heal, or actually heals. Because remember, he tried to heal Den at one point too. So there are things that look very deliberate, that he understands some of his powers potentially. So I can understand why we would think that. And I think when it comes to who would train him, that's a really tough one, because like you said, we don't really know exactly what kind of training happens when the Jedi take a child, like an infant, supposedly. Like, I'm assuming they get them in infancy, right? I think that's pretty much established. We don't know exactly what kind of training or when the training truly begins, do we?
No.
Yeah.
The closest we had was in
Phantom Menace.
No, I was thinking Dooku.
Oh.
Dooku Jedi Lost, when he was, they had younglings in there. They gave us some context, but I don't know exactly when, but it's pretty young. I mean, they've got to be able to walk and talk and all that. I mean, they bring him in this like probably 5-6 years old at most. So about that age.
Right. So and then again, then you have to take the race into consideration. Like, when would he be able to actually apply some of these bits of training? And I'm sorry, healing seems to be a fairly advanced and focused thing. Maybe that's just me wanting it to be something special, but there's a lot of good questions in there that we don't really have answers to. But I could definitely see why we would think that he's had some sort of training, because he looks very deliberate with what he's doing.
Yeah. Here's a question that just came through, and it's kind of relevant and on point. And Stephanie says, and does the training begin at different ages for different species? I think the answer is yes.
Yeah.
Only because it's all relative to that species itself, which, with Yoda around and Yaddle around, and okay, you've got some bearing, and you have some historic, you've got an example to say, hey, is 50 years, how old is 50 years old? Are they ready? Now, I don't know that anybody really could say whether or not they'd be ready for training. Not that they'll find a Jedi to do this. Maybe they will, but yeah, I think it is definitely all relative to the race itself and how well they mature and how fast they mature and all that.
Yep, completely agree.
All right, next question is from Cab. What do you think the likelihood is of getting a flashback to the early days of the Darksaber and Mandalorians? Would it interrupt the flow of the 8-episode season?
So I'm going to answer the second question first, because yes, I think it would if we went back that far. I think the more likely flashback we might get is how Gideon obtained it and when he did. So that might be back to the Clone Wars era. It might be back to the Rebels era. It might be something more recent. So I think that is possible. But I think if you go back too far, it could be disruptive to the episode quite a bit, because then when you go back to these things, if you spend any time there, you have to establish things for the most part. You have to establish at least smaller pieces of what's going on around you. And we saw with the flashback of this one, they didn't have to, but they can do building blocks, so they can say, here's smaller pieces of this kid's past. And then we build it up and say, okay, here's the final event, but it was still very tight and concise.
Yeah.
But the further back you go, and the Darksaber is a kind of a complex thing, because it's one of these, sword of power type of deals, one of these, staves of leadership, whatever your culture is, whatever you want to call it, it's the symbol of leadership within the clan. So you would have to establish something with it, which you could do without interrupting anything. But I think the further back you go, the more you have to talk about it, especially for us who are in the weeds on it, because we're going to want to know who all these characters are and what exactly happened, especially if they don't quite tie with what we're used to.
Yes.
What do you think?
Yeah, I would agree 100%. I think 8 episodes is a very short amount of time to try to squeeze any significant amount of backstory or fill in the blanks, if you will, for what happened with the Darksaber and the Mandalorians. Now, that said, to your point, I think they can do small bits and pieces here and there to kind of help fill in smaller gaps so that we know the more relevant parts to Gideon and to what's happened with Mandalore. I think that's probably given. And they could do that very, they don't need to spend a lot of time with it. I mean, you think about, we got a lot from the flashbacks, and they've already established, so they've already broken the seal on flashbacks. So I think it's pretty much fair game at this point that we could potentially see something like that to explain what happened with the, Gideon and the Mandalorians. I wonder, speaking of flashbacks, and this is just an aside thought I had right now, but I wonder if they're going to continue the flashbacks, but do that for the Mandalorian. So we see more of, okay, now that he's been rescued by Crimson Dawn or the Mandalorians, what did that look like now? What was his
Right.
first, steps, his first few steps, if you will, as a Mandalorian, and his training, and does he meet somebody that's, truly significant, right? You think about there's probably people that were very influential in his life when he was a Mandalorian child, or a what do you call it? Not a youngling. What's the one that they call him?
Foundling.
Foundling, yeah. Maybe there were people that were significant and important in his life as a foundling who are yet to be shown in season 2 or season 3. Maybe that was the person that was walking with the spurs and the boots, and we don't know. There's a lot of history here that we just don't know yet, which I think would be really cool. But yes, I think the Darksaber will probably come back. We'll get more information about it. I would like to see the Darksaber have the same kind of lore, notoriety as something like the Skywalker saber. There's a lot of history there with it, and it's really kind of one dude that's telling us that history, and that's Dave Filoni. But there's a lot there, and I think there's still a lot more to be told.
Yeah. Now, one show that did a lot of flashbacks back and forth throughout a season, now they had 20-something episodes that worked pretty well, was the first season of Arrow. So Stargate Pioneer is probably super happy that I'm mentioning this because he's a huge DC fan, or the CW show fans. But they would constantly go back and forth for Oliver Queen's, what he is now as the developing of the Green Arrow, and then going back then of when his time was on the Isle and all these challenges he had. But that's one way they've done it well in a show. But at the same time, it's that was intentional and part of the show structure, and that's just not part of our structure here.
Yeah.
All right. Where are we at? Star-Lord 07. Why is Baby Yoda so drained after using the Force?
So, yeah, and I think Mike asked a question too. I didn't want to give him credit because he didn't submit his question through the proper channels. But no, so Star-Lord 07, thank you for the question. I think it's probably a combination of two things, and I was kind of alluding to this earlier. It's one, he's an infant or a younger person of sorts, right?
Toddlerish.
Sure, yeah, toddlerish. And so pretty much anything that he does with the Force exhausts him in some way. And we see that with Yoda a little bit later, not because he's younger, but because he's older, right? When he lifts the X-Wing out of the water in Empire Strikes Back, he is drained. Now, he wasn't fainting and falling back, but it did take a lot out of him. You could talk about the Rise of Skywalker, transferring the life there. Maybe that's why Kylo Ren died. Some of these, there's a toll, I guess, is what they're explaining now. There is some kind of a toll that's taken on your body when using the Force or exuding, certain levels of the Force or the amount of Force. It's probably all relative to how powerful you are, how adept you are, how much control you have, how much mastery and training you've had. I think all those things kind of factor into it. So if you think about it from that perspective, if all that's true, or at least some of it's true, a child doing this is probably going to fall back on their butt or pass out completely because they're expending way too much energy to kind of do some of these things.
Well, and if we want to apply how we grew up, Albert, let's apply this to a video game. So you have some characters with an energy bar, and that's how they use their special abilities. As you are a lower level, it takes more energy, and you do certain things until you level up. You do your specifications, all the fancy stuff, all the nerd stuff, and then you're able to accomplish more, as you progress and as you level up. So I kind of viewed this more as a video game of sorts because it actually kind of applies.
Yep. I like it. It's a good analogy. Yeah. It's very relevant.
Maybe Yoda is part of World of Warcraft. It's now canon.
It is. You've heard it here first.
That's right.
All right. Next question comes from Patreon member JMac. This is probably not a full episode maker, but if we're expecting to see Ahsoka, is it fair to assume we'll see Sabine Wren make an appearance? Also, considering the journey they went on together at the end of Rebels. They both either use the Force or have seen the Force, or of the Force in Sabine's case. So it would make sense that they'd be in tune with Mandalorian running around the galaxy with a Force-wielding toddler. What about Gar Saxon and the other Imperial loyalists on Mandalore? So I guess there's two questions there.
Yeah, and maybe I'll let you take that second one. I think the first one, I am way more excited about maybe seeing Sabine really than Ahsoka. I got to be honest with you. But he's absolutely right. You've got both the Force aspect of it, and then Sabine also has the Darksaber connection to it all.
Yep.
Right. She wielded it. She was trained by Kanan, so you got that connection as well. Jedi, training someone with a saber as well. So there's a lot of connections there. So I absolutely agree. I think it's very possible we would see this, and especially if so we don't really know what happened, of course, with Sabine and Ahsoka, but if they were traveling for an extended period of time together, then it is very well possible that they're still traveling the galaxy now, looking for whomever or doing whatever they're doing. And it's possible that they'll either cross paths or maybe we'll get a reference or something like that. And that would be really cool to get. That would be cool to get the history of the Darksaber from her.
Yep.
You know, and getting some of that, of what it meant, you know, because we're not clear if the Mandalorian has this knowledge. Presumably he would, but he also doesn't seem to have a lot of knowledge about the great Mandalore, all this other stuff, right? So the history aspect of things back in the day. So unclear if he's really in tune with what's going on with the Darksaber either, but I think that would be really neat to do that.
Yeah.
So what do you think about that? And then we'll tackle the Gar Saxon question.
So for Sabine Wren and Ahsoka, yeah, I mean, I think it's a given. And there was a lot of speculation as to whether or not that was Sasha Banks that we saw in the trailer, whether or not she was playing a Sabine Wren. She looks like Sabine Wren to me. But, you know, again, we talked about earlier.
Really?
We kind of see what we want to sometimes. And it wouldn't be uncommon for her to be in a cloak. I mean, there are plenty of episodes in Rebels where they're running around, keeping their head down and trying to stay undercover. Why she be doing that now? I don't know. It could be just remnants of what happened with the Empire. She still doesn't feel safe. Who knows? So I think that's very possible. And I think you're right. And we didn't talk about this coming on to the air, but I'm 100% in the camp of, if anybody's going to train the child or not the child. I think you can see my background here, right there with the Darksaber. But if anybody's going to train the Mandalorian, and I'm making a big assumption that he will have to be trained to use the lightsaber, he wants to be trained, it's likely going to be somebody like Sabine Wren. I don't think it's going to be Ahsoka. You know, I think it makes sense that it would be Sabine Wren, especially since we know she's adept at using it. Maybe not a master, but the fact that she is a Mandalorian, it just feels like that's going to be the right. And I think it's safer once you put Ahsoka in there outside of just kind of like a guiding, you know, legendary figure. Then it becomes really difficult to say, okay, now what happens with her now that you've introduced her? Now she's a part of the show. What are you going to do? Are you going to keep that going? Because I think it's kind of with the Boba Fett thing. There could be some overshadowing that happens. But somebody like Sabine Wren isn't Ahsoka Tano, and could be a nice segue to get us to Ahsoka Tano without really bringing her in full-fledged into this program, because I don't think that's where they're going. They're tabling that for the, you know, buddy cop series that we've got, where they're looking for, you know, Ezra and Thrawn a little bit later. So with somebody like Sabine Wren, I think, my guess is they're probably going to find her first, and it's through that she says, well, I know where to find Ahsoka, or she knows how to find Ahsoka, and that becomes a journey in itself to go find Ahsoka to kind of, you know, teach him the Jedi ways and that kind of thing.
Yeah, I completely agree. I like it.
Yeah. As far as Gar Saxon, he's dead. So he died in Rebels, Star Wars Rebels. There was an episode. I was going to really test my knowledge here, but I don't remember what season it was. Maybe season 3. But anyways, so Ursa, Sabine's mom, ends up shooting him because there was a point there where he was beat down. Sabine had a chance to kill him. She decided not to. And as she kind of turned her back, he pulls out a blaster and is about to shoot her, and Ursa shoots him and kills Gar Saxon. So Gar Saxon isn't really even a part of this anymore. Now, that said, there were still loyalists that were dispersed and ran like cockroaches once the Bo-Katan came in and Mandalore was kind of restored, at least temporarily. What happened to them, I don't know. That's going to be a very, very interesting thing. It's one of the things I'm so interested about, that it's such a deep cut, is the relationship between the Imperial loyalists that left, and now you've got the Empire coming in as part of the Purge, and what happens there. And I have a theory, but it's for another question, so I'm not going to say what I think could possibly we see there a little bit later, but that all is very, very intriguing for me. Hopefully we get some answers here.
Yeah, I think the Imperial loyalist angle is interesting, because then you have factions within the Mandalorian which are already sparse. So that internal conflict becomes more interesting than any kind of grander scale conflict too.
Yeah, and it's cool. J-Max with us right now. It's cool. You're actually hitting on somebody. It's not so much Gar Saxon per se. I know he was kind of like the figure, but he stood for something, and that was these Mandalorians that were loyal to the Empire, and the Empire is no longer around, and the Empire took no mercy on the Mandalorians. Did it include them? Well, that's I think where it's more interesting to kind of dig into a little bit. So again, I got some more thoughts on that here in just a few minutes.
Cool. All right. Last Patreon question.
Last Patreon. Is this mine? Oh, yeah, I'm asking you.
Yep.
Wit Holcomb. How will we learn the name of the child?
I don't think we will. And to be honest, I don't know that I want to. We don't know that it's we don't know where he's been or anything like that. So they would have to find someone who, either trained him or birthed him or found him that wasn't a bounty hunter to get the name.
Yep.
And honestly, it seems like he will probably be named if anything. But I think right now we're perfectly content with calling him the child, and they seem content with that in the show itself. So that's kind of what I'm going with. I don't want to know the name of the child, to be honest with you. I like the ambiguousness of it.
Here's my thing on the child's name. Do we get his official name? No. But at some point, I think they're going to have to call him something. Like they skirted around. Like Favreau he went through great lengths to not ever have to refer to the child by, hey, so-and-so, or what's it, like someone just asking. I think we brought this up during Sanctuary, right? Like no one ever we never saw the scene where the child or O'Mara said, hey, what does he have a name? Like, what were they calling him? They had to call him something, right? So while he may not get an official name, I don't think we're ever going to learn his birth name. I don't think we'll ever probably learn that. I do think what's that?
If he even had one.
If he even had one. Yeah, good point. I think we're going to get something, a pet name, if you will. I hate to call it because he's not really a pet, although he gets treated like that. But I think we're going to get some kind of a nickname or something. He's going to be Christian. Someone's going to do it. It's going to stick. And that's hopefully what we'll call him at some point. I was going to say Djarin may be his last name at some point by the end of the series. If you think about his clan, maybe he adopts his clan name. Maybe it's kind of like a Skywalker thing where he just takes it on himself. But
Or maybe we have a nickname from his childhood that then gets applied to the child or something.
Yeah. Right.
Or, pure tinfoil hat type of thing. But
there's Dale. I like Dale's. Hey, kid. Hey, kid.
Yeah, there you go.
Hey, kid.
Very good. All right. So that wraps up our Patreon questions. So thanks to everyone there for the support. And hopefully you got somewhat of an answer you're looking for. All right. So let's switch over to Facebook. So Katya Barga, she's regularly on the live show. So thanks for tuning in.
She was here tonight. If you're there, Katya, make yourself known. I don't know. She goes to bed early. She's like in Brazil or something, so it's late there. But go on, sorry.
Yeah, thanks for staying up late with us then. So she got a few questions here. Well, let's just tackle the first one first. Do you think they will explore and show something about Cara Dune's past?
Yes, I think for sure, 100%. I think it's just a matter of time. Now, again, this goes back into the 8 episodes thing, and do we have enough time to do all that while trying to explain, where's the baby going? Where are the Jedi? Ahsoka? Gideon, there's a lot of history here, right? But I think we will get some kind of background, more information about her background. I think the more intriguing piece of that is kind of what we talked about either the last episode or 2 episodes ago. Does she have some dirt here? Are we going to see, will it be, the Empire or bounty hunters that are coming up with her? Is that going to all catch up with her? Or the more interesting thing is it the New Republic? Do they have dirt on her? Is some of the choices that she made going to catch up with her and impact not only the Mandalorian, but the rest of the crew as well? So all that I think would be really great development for her and some really cool stuff to kind of feed us in the midst of everything else that's going on with season 2.
Agreed. I don't know if we'll actually see anything, although I think that would be pretty interesting to see a Rebel shock trooper in action doing something against the Empire.
Yeah.
But definitely they're gonna have to explore some of it. They just teased too much of it out. The 2 or 3 times they've really brought it out that she's in the way that she acts and when she's interacting with the Empire is just, you can't not notice it. So there's got to be more. We've got to pull some of that out, hopefully very naturally, but it's definitely going to be there.
Yeah.
Next question from her. Will they tease something about Palpatine then?
Eesh. This is, will they tease Palpatine? I think they'll tease Snoke before they tease Palpatine. Like if there may be an indirect reference of Palpatine's reign, right? Something really innocuous like that. But I think what's more plausible and feasible is mentioning of reporting up to Snoke, or we seeing that what's happening with Gideon and maybe the midichlorians, or if that's really the case, or why they want the child, all of that funneling up to somebody that they talk about and allude to being somebody like Snoke. Because again, he is around at this point. He is influencing. He's been around since the Clone Wars. We know that. So where is he? All right, this is a good opportunity to kind of introduce him if they want to.
Right, and I think that would be the case if you're going to go that route, because it would be early because the First Order isn't established yet, at least publicly or across the galaxy. So if it would be some very early iteration of that. Mm-hmm. And because really there doesn't appear to be any kind of centralized power anywhere for the Empire. So it is difficult to really. So I think Palpatine is pretty much a hard no. I think sounds like we're in agreement there.
Yeah.
Pretty much a hard no. And Snoke, I would still put it fairly low on the
Yes.
on the totem pole, because even if we see Starkiller Base, we're more likely to see one of these other characters, because we know Hux. It seems like Hux was a champion for it when we looked at when we got the scene in Rise of Skywalker, the debacle of Starkiller Base, and everyone pretty much looked right at Hux. So between him and his father, that seems a more likely scenario than potentially even Snoke.
Yeah, there's a question a little bit later about potentially other cameos or whatever, and we'll talk more about those here.
Right. Her last one. Any chance of seeing Luke this season?
So so we kind of tackled this a little bit earlier. My short answer is no. If we do, I really think it's going to be a cameo voice, kind of like a. Well, I'll talk about cameos here in just one second. I don't want to get on a soapbox about cameos, but I think we hear it's either going to be a mention of Luke Skywalker. If that is Red 5, then we may see him in the cockpit giving a thumbs up, good luck kind of thing. I've got other things to do. He's got a lot of stuff on his plate right now, right? We know that.
Right.
He is traversing the entire galaxy looking for remnants of the Jedi and the Sith, and really kind of putting all the pieces together and trying to rebuild and start the Jedi Order again. So he's got a lot on his plate. But I don't think it's out of the question to think that as part of, hey, let me get you on the right path, we'll escort you in, you can follow us or follow me, that kind of thing. Maybe that's the case. I don't know. So I think that's probably likely that all we'll get from Luke Skywalker. Maybe we even get Hamill do a voice. I mean, right, over a radio or something, right, saying good luck. May the Force be with you. That'd be really powerful. And that's all we get. I'd be happy with that. The problem is, I mean, the problem with Luke Skywalker is, again, you bring him in, it's like, holy crap, now what do you do with him, right? And the thing about cameos, so really quickly, the thing about cameos is you got to be really careful. If you think about like Rogue One, where we got Dr. Ebazon, right? The one we know from Episode 4 in Walrus Man. They did that, and they showed him, they threw him up there. It really had no relevance on the story whatsoever. It was kind of like a, hey, kind of cool thing, but he's such a lower minor character that it's okay to do that. I don't think you can pull that off with somebody like Luke Skywalker unless it helps drive the story, unless it drives the narrative. Then I think you're okay with it. But then it's very small dosage. I don't think you can use them a lot in heavy dosage to do something like that. Otherwise, then it feels like it's just fan service, and that's not what we want. And I don't think Favreau would do that, honestly.
Yeah, and I'm in the camp that I don't think it's Red 5 anyway, to be honest with you. But no, I think I'm with you. I think it's a no. Are we going to see him? Might we get a reference to his name? I think that's possible, especially if we have any meaningful dialogue with Ahsoka in particular. I think is how that would likely come out, because even Sabine, while she might have some knowledge, so it could come from Sabine, I suppose, but I think that's about the best we'll get. I don't think we'll get a hologram or an audio message or something like that that would do that, because then again, because what does that do? That starts steering you towards the hunt for Luke Skywalker for the Mandalorian. Those are the types of things you could quickly go down that rabbit hole. And again, I don't think they would. I don't think that's the intent of the show. That's not what they want to do with it. But could you get a reference to it? And maybe he's already, I don't know if he's already disappeared or not. Not likely. Actually, no, he hasn't. To go back real quick though, so there was a music train, and Katya put this out there. Isn't Hux pretty young at this point? Too young to be in this. And you and I are talking about Brendel Hux.
Yeah, Brendel Hux, really, not Armitage Hux.
Right. So we know Armitage was the blame of Starkiller was put at his feet in Rise of Skywalker, but Brendel Hux was there before him, and he was in a position of leadership. Although Armitage was developing up the ranks, and he would have been
9 years old at this point.
Oh, okay. I didn't. He was born at the man.
He was born like right around right on, like same thing with Kylo Ren, or not? Is it Kylo Ren? Yeah, Kylo Ren. He was conceived right around the time at 0 ABY or just prior to that. So he would have been maybe 9, 10-ish years old at this point. So don't get me wrong. If we get a Brendel Hux, maybe we see a little Armitage hanging out next to a little redhead child there. That's kind of fan service if you ask me. But yeah, he's not really anything but just in the academy at this point, or doing whatever he's doing.
Right. But just for clarity, we were talking about Brendel Hux in that moment.
And if you want to know more about Brendel Hux, go read Phasma, because you get a lot of them in that.
You get a lot of them at that.
Was that all the questions? That
was all for Facebook. Yeah. Thanks, Katya. Appreciate it.
Yep. Thanks for staying up too.
All right. Email. So John Spadone. Sorry if I apologize if I said that incorrectly.
What's up, guys? Long-time listener, first-time caller. I always love that. So the one thing that's been bothering me, what the heck is Death Watch doing rescuing children during the Clone Wars? Basically, how, when, and why did the foundling culture religion begin? It must have been before the death of Satine. Anyways, thanks for everything you do. So thank you, John.
Yeah, a lot of speculate. We're gonna have to speculate a lot to get to this one, I think. So why was Death Watch rescuing children? I think Death Watch again. They still, I think, fundamentally had a lot of the same cultural connections to what they had, even though they didn't have a connection to the political side of Mandalore. And in fact, they kind of despised the whole political nature of where the culture had gone. And so for them to rescue kids or to have, to do good things, I think that's okay. I think that's in line with what they are. They still need to recruit. They still want to build the ranks. They still want to grow. And so them inserting themselves into something is probably a fair, good question. Why are they inserting themselves into a conflict? But the actual rescuing and keeping of foundlings and or introducing new foundlings, it doesn't surprise me at all. We'll pause there and see what you think.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think, so what you were hitting on is they're a proud people, right? The Mandalorians, and I say people, creed, whatever. But they are a proud people. And yeah, they may have differences. They may have very stark differences politically in the direction of, you think about pacifist versus the aggressiveness that we've always had historically with the Mandalorians. They certainly are at odds. But at the core, I think all of them agree that we are all Mandalorians and we do take care of each other. There's probably some honest sincerity in them rescuing from that perspective alone. However, that said, if you want to go the route of, okay, they are a little bit tainted, they're a little bit more radicalized, you could easily go with the angle that they're looking out for themselves. They've got potential kids here that they can rescue, train, bring to their ranks, increase the effectiveness and the numbers within Death Watch and all of that. Maybe that's a little bit cynical, but there may be a little bit of that in there. It could just be both. But yeah, to your point, I think really it's probably coming from a place of we need to go ahead and rescue kids because we are going to take them and do that. We need to build our ranks. The other part of that is Death Watch maybe isn't the Death Watch that we know at this point either. They could just be Mandalorians that have changed their ways, like I said. And this is going to play into a theory, and I've teased it twice, but it's coming a little bit later. Hopefully it's not, I'm going to let you down. But Death Watch may still have the symbol on their arm, but what they stand for could be completely different at this point. And I think that's more likely the case, and I have a valid reason as to why that would be the case. But again, later. Okay.
Man, you better deliver on this.
I don't know if I'm going to,
because now I don't even know where the hell it's going.
It's nothing big. It's very small and minor, but I think it's plausible and feasible, and it would explain some of this.
Now you're backing off on it.
I am. I'm backpedaling. All right. Well, I got to go. Take care, Jonesy. You get the rest of the show. All right. Now, GM 2187 is up next.
Hold on. We still got some other parts. So how did how, when, and why the founding culture religion begin? That's really unclear, but yeah, it does seem like this goes way back in their history. So I'm in the camp. So I want it to be like that. So I'm going to assume it is. We don't really have any definitive timeline, but the way that the armorer talks about this, though, it seems like it is an established type of thing. I don't know that the whole "this is the way" thing is anything necessarily new. I view it as more of a getting back to your roots. But if this was going on in the Clone Wars and there were foundlings in the Clone Wars, then there's reason to believe that this is a very long-standing cultural thing and an observed practice that goes back generations and millennia and things like that.
Yeah.
So that's what I would go back.
Yeah, I would agree. I think there's certain things that we're being told here that for us to see, when we look at them on the surface, they feel like they're new. And so maybe we immediately assume that those are new because, of the events that happened with the Great Purge, and this is a new beginning and stuff like that. But then I think they're also trying to say, look, these things were always there. They were always happening, whether they happened across the board and everybody was on board with saying this is the way, or foundlings and stuff. I mean, you had different factions of Mandalorians. They had all different kinds of customs. Maybe there was a core set of customs, and there was the original Mandalorians, and maybe that's what these guys are practicing. I mean, who knows? I think all of that hopefully will get explained to some extent, but I don't think it's unreasonable to think that some of the stuff that we're seeing today is just the way it's always been, even though we didn't see it in the Clone Wars because it wasn't relative to what the story was or what they were trying to say, right? There was never an opportunity to say this is the way, or never an opportunity to explain that the Mandalorians have foundlings as well, and this is they dedicate all this money or stuff to them and to build them up. Some of that may just be because they're in dire straits of rebuilding their numbers, and so that's a new custom. I just don't know enough yet. There's a lot of speculation there, I think.
Right. All right, we're running a little bit short on time, so what we're going to do for these, we're going to get into some Discord questions now. We're going to try to answer these pretty quickly. Maybe we'll alternate which ones we actually answer, make sure we can get through as many as we can.
Yeah.
So Fando, also known as GM2187. So sometimes I listen to the show and think I should be a consultant or something. I know more about this than them. Yeah, that is probably true. Yeah. And you know what? You are just one of many that screams at their radios. Because I still remember this back when you and I have talked about this a ton of times. Back when we were listening to the show, we were introduced to it, listening to Mike and company, and it was constantly yelling at the radio. Like, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard, or get back on topic, or whatever it was. Right.
Yeah.
So those were, but yeah, I look back on those, and those were fantastic moments because it how in you are to into the show you are, and that's how I'm going to view that comment.
Yeah,
you really like it.
It's good feedback. It's great, and as a reward, we have something for you at the very end of the show.
Yeah. So all right, here we go. So with George visiting the set of the first 2 seasons and him having worked closely with Filoni before, do you think there's any chance he would direct or write any of the episodes?
No. And as of today, they announced the writers for season 2 as well as the directors. I don't know if it's officially or unofficially, but it's by all accounts and by good word, we know that Favreau wrote all of them with the exception of one episode that was written by Dave Filoni, and the directors are George Lucas is not listed as director. So I think he influenced, and hopefully in the BTS stuff at the end of season 2, we'll get to know. They'll share, or maybe as the season goes through, they'll share us some of the influences that he had. But I don't think he's got a part in this.
Nope. Yeah, and this is Favreau's baby with Filoni in tow. So I don't think there's any chance he'll write anything.
Yep.
All right, let's get to another. Would you be opposed to learning more about Baby Yoda and possibly visiting his home planet and meeting other members of his species? I think some people are yes. I'm really a no. I know you are. I want this to be a very rare species. I want it to be a mystery. I want us to still have questions. I don't want to answer everything. And this is one of these things that has always enticed us. What is Yoda? What is Yaddle? What is the child? Where do they come from? So on and so forth. I'm okay with us not knowing. And quite honestly, I don't see how they would know unless Luke somehow got access to the Jedi archives. But I got to be honest, nothing suggests that's happened.
All right. I'm on the other camp, and Jonesy, no surprise to you. I do like to know everything that happens. That's why the certain point of view books are exciting to me, or the Tales of Dark and Light from the Clone Wars are exciting to me. I do want to know. So I don't have to have it. I'm not saying I do, but I'm not opposed to it. Give me the details. The thing I always go back to, and I've said it billions of times on the show, give me a good story, and I think everybody will get on board. There are going to be people that are not going to like it, and I totally respect that. I understand why. But in my experience, at some point, everything gets explained, and you can look at across all kinds of fandoms. Eventually, it all does come out. I had an example with Doomsday and Superman, but we're out of time for that. But
right. So Jim 20, he had a bunch of questions for us. Let's answer one more, I think, and we'll thank you for all of those. We'll make sure we get as many in as possible.
Yep.
I think we've kind of talked. What Star Wars character would you want to see appear in The Mandalorian?
Oh, okay. Yeah, great. This is the one that I wanted to touch on. So quickly, without a lot of explanation, I think Brendel Hux is possible. I think Modin Kennedy. You guys remember him from The Rise of Skywalker? He's still around. He's around at this point. So I think we could see him. General Pride. Pride is from Rise of Skywalker. Kennedy is from Last Jedi. So I think any one of those guys would be interesting to see. Even if it's just a name drop, I think it'd be fine. I think Lor Santeca is probably fair game as well. Especially, you think about it, he's got to go look for the Jedi. We know there's a Church of the Force that was still around, or still maybe, I think it's still around at this point, or at least it's starting up again somewhere. But he could get in contact with somebody like Lor Santeca, which would then lead to Luke and all that other stuff. But he's possible. We've already talked about Snoke. And this is I'm going to probably answer a question a little bit later about who would I want to see. The one person that we've not talked about, I don't think on this show, that I would like to see that was in Star Wars Rebels is Fen Rao. And Fen Rao was, he was a Mandalorian that was opposed to the Rebels, and eventually he joins them and he becomes a main character. He's the guy that tells in the Rebels story, he tells the origins of the Darksaber. It's that guy. and he did not die in Rebels. I think he probably could still be around, and he would be a good way to kind of help tell the tale of what happened with the Siege of Mandalore, or what happened after the Mandalorians left and all that. And I think he'd be a good way to bridge those two series together.
Yeah, you stole my surprise one. Yeah, Fenn Rau, it doesn't get really a lot of stage time, but yeah, him and Sabine. I think Sabine's my number one. I want to see Sabine, and then Fenn Rau would be cool for the exact reasons that you had. Someone has to give that history of the Darksaber. I'd like it to be Sabine, but if it was him, that would be awesome as well, because we can. We've heard this story before. Maybe we hear from a little bit different perspective where he's at right now.
Yep. So. All right, here's a quick question for you. Why is the nickname Mando when the word is Mandalorian?
So if we think about the language, well, yeah, I don't know, but I'm going to make one up. So the language is Mandoa, right?
Yeah.
I believe that's what it is. Mando apostrophe A. So short of that is Mando, and Manda doesn't sound as good as Mando. So they just said Mando.
Mando. Yeah, instead of Manda. Yeah, I'm with you too. It came from, I tried to go back and do, like, I was pulling all kinds of comic books out and everything, and they were calling it Mando back in the Dark Horse comics.
Yeah.
So it came from Legends as far as I know, because they obviously never referred to them in canon stuff, but it came from Legends.
Because it's a pain to keep writing out Mandalorian. So,
right,
and it's short. But I think it's something just with the Mandoa, it just makes sense. If that's the name of the language, then we keep shortening it. So thanks for the question, Mike 5150. Eddie Van Halen, passed away today. That was sad.
I know.
Sir Fuente, why does Mando's tribe of Mandalorians keep their helmets on? Are less extremist Mandalorians still around, or were they wiped out?
So I guess there's two questions here. Why do they keep their helmets on? I think it's a hiding your numbers thing. I don't know if that really works, but I think that's how I interpreted it from season 1. That if they're only going out if they're only going to the surface when they really need to, if they keep their helmets on the entire time, then they all look the same, except the chubby one, but they all look the same for the most part. So it's kind of hard to know how many there are. Because that is a new concept, like them leaving the helmets on, that I don't remember from anywhere else. And we certainly don't see it in the Clone Wars. They're taking their helmets all the time off in Clone Wars. So it has to be something, and Rebels too. So, sorry, Star Wars Rebels as well. So it has to be something that they've got to be doing it for a purpose, to either protect their numbers or protect their identity. In whatever way. Maybe they're being hunted still again because of the Empire and all that, but that would be my explanation. Are there less extremist Mandalorians around? Oh yeah, I think there still are. Whether they're front and center or around, my guess is they're scattered through the galaxy. If you play into the theory we've been talking about, on this show about him reuniting all the clans, maybe as the kind of ultimate storyline, the overarching storyline here, apart from the child itself, then I think it makes sense that at some point these are all going to come out. He's going to rally all these people together and rebuild Mandalore to, great heights again.
Right. Only thing I'll add to the first question of why they keep their helmets on, I like the idea that it's a bit of a reestablishment of the creed, and now as a part of the lifestyle, as part of the culture. So I think that was something I would like for them to kind of confirm as well.
Yeah.
It seems true. All right. Thanks. All right. It's Sadis, right? Darth Sadis. Is that how you pronounce it?
I don't know. Sadis, Cadis? Hey, if you're with us, put it in there. Give us a phonetic spelling in there somewhere.
Right. Yeah. Former Jason Solo. I, for one, want to see how the relationship between Mando and Gideon plays out this season. Obviously, Gideon is searching for the child for some mysterious reason, but I want to see how Gideon goes about this, and if he might try to bribe or coerce Mando. Boba Fett could also play in here if he was hired to search for the Mando. So I would love to hear your thoughts on the dynamic between the two, and thoughts concerning a final showdown between them. So I'm assuming this is a showdown between Gideon and Din.
Mando.
Yep. Mando.
Yeah. So I think we know that they're gonna tee off at some point in the series, because during the Entertainment Weekly article, Carlos Despacito, or that's not his name. That's a song by somebody else. Anyways, he mentioned that they were gonna fight and go mano a mano. So I think though, without I kind of want to. I want to see that fight. I've got a lot of questions about how that fight's going to play out. Whether or not we're going to see new weapons, and which kind of leads to why I want to do the next show after this. But on top of that, is he going to use the Darksaber when he fight? Is he going to use some kind of saber to fight when he fights Gideon? Or are they going to go back to Legends? We were talking about this when we came on the air. Beskar used to be impenetrable even through lightsabers. That was why they were able to go toe to toe with the Jedi, right? And we don't know if that's the case. It doesn't seem like it's as sturdy or as strong as it was in Legends. So maybe they've changed that. But if that's the case, then maybe he doesn't need any other weapons other than the ones he has to fight Gideon. But I think the more interesting fight between these two is going to be the psychological warfare, the psychology of at some point you think about where the Mandalorian is right now. He could be on the run, I guess, from Gideon, and there's things in the trailer that kind of lead me down this path. But he's got to get the Mandalorian to come to him if he can't find him. And so there's some great stuff in here. Like, what if he goes after somebody like Grief Karga or Cara Dune and threatens them and tries to get the Mandalorian to come to him and give up the child? We know he's going to lose the child as well, because that came out at some point that the child's not going to be with him. And we saw that one scene where the Mandalorian's coming up for water. So unless somebody's watching the child, he's been separated at that point. You know, whether Gideon goes after somebody like the Armorer and uses them as a hostage, maybe it's the remaining Mandos. I think the one person, though, that I would expect him to go after, if I was Gideon and I want to get to him, I got to figure out how to get there first. But somebody like Omera, right? What if he goes after Omera and goes after her daughter and uses them to extort him to come after, to show up and hand over the child or fight them fight or whatever? I think that would be a good way to introduce that character again, kind of tie that up, give us a reason why that episode happened, and then use that, because I don't know what else the Mandalorian has. He has a child. He doesn't have anything else outside of the Mandos, but you got to have something. He has to hold something over him and hold something dear to him. And I think that would be a good way to kind of do that.
So you don't think his friends are enough? I don't really like the idea of the damsel in distress thing anymore. It's just kind of played out, in my opinion. But you don't think Cara Dune or Grief?
I don't think it's I don't think it's I think it's possible, but I think that's a harder target than going after somebody like a damsel, right? And then maybe that's not a good reason, but he's got to go in. I mean, Navarro is kind of on the up and up. They're rebuilding. So now you have Gideon going in there with the Empire, whatever forces he's got left, which I'm assuming he doesn't have as many now because they mentioned they wiped them all out. But you're expecting him to go in there now and take on not only Cara Dune, but Grief Karga, all the bounty hunters all over again. That seems like a harder target to go after. So he could do it, but I think the easier target and the way to get to his heart and extort him for what he wants is to go after somebody like Omera.
Yeah. So I'll just be exceptionally brief. It's the psychological warfare of this character that makes him interesting. That he knows things. He knows how to psych them out. He knows how to push buttons. And I just want to see more of that. I'm really curious how they do a toe-to-toe battle. If it's actually a toe-to-toe battle, like we would visualize when we hear the word battle or a fight, or is it something else? Because he doesn't really necessarily look like he would win in a fight with the Mando, but he's very, smart and very crafty, I'm sure. And clearly he uses whatever around him for his advantage as well. So, but again, I'm looking more forward to the psychological aspect of it. So good question.
Yep. Sorry, I'm making a quick note because I just thought of something else that just literally popped into my head right now of something that I would hope to see when we're talking about season 2 predictions. I just had another one, which I thought was kind of cool. All right. I think that was it for that question, right? All right, Utini, we'll go into lightning round. Who's your favorite character from the show?
Mando, without question.
I think it's a child for me, but I have a feeling it's going to be Mando after season 2.
Yep.
How do you feel? What do you feel they could have done better?
Ooh, I'm going to go with some of the writing was a little bit off, like some of Grief's, some of the things that he was saying. It's just the way it was delivered. Some of the effects landed a little bit short for me. And we talked a little bit about throughout our revisit of the show, we saw some things that worked exceptionally well and some things that didn't necessarily work well. There was a little bit too much kind of silly humor that didn't really work. Like the one with the Corellian kid. I can't remember the name of these episodes, but that one in particular with the lady who was in the repairing the ship didn't mind what was going on, but it was just kind of how it was all delivered. So some of it was just nitpicky stuff. I didn't really have anything major that I wanted to change with the show. How about you?
Yeah, no, I don't. I would agree. I don't think there's anything major. Maybe longer episodes.
Oh, there's that.
But beyond that, and maybe even more episodes. But there's a production cost there, so I get it. But beyond that, I get, it's nitpicking stuff. More montages. Can I throw that?
Oh my God, yeah, less montages.
No, and to your point though, the pacing, and maybe it was the writing. I think you're right there. Some of the writing was kind of, but the pacing was more a concern with me. Like at moments it felt like it was really moving, and then other moments it felt like it dragged down. It was inconsistent, if you will. But again, we're nitpicking. I think overall, if you look at it holistically, the season 1 was great and amazing, and that's why we're talking about it and everybody's excited.
Great segue into the next one from Mutini.
Yeah.
What has exceeded your expectations?
I think the direction of the show that they took it and making it this clan of 2, I think that caught a lot of us off guard. I mean, no one was really thinking that. Yeah, it was kind of evident for me, I think, or a lot of folks early on this was the story, and whether you like it or not, that's where it's going. But I think it caught a lot of people off guard, and I think they're better for it. And I thought they did a good job of just introducing really, really great characters with a lot of potential for growth. And we've talked about ad nauseum at this point on this show, but you think about all the back history for a lot of these characters and the situations that they're in today, there's a lot of material here yet to be told. So that exceeded my expectations.
Yeah, and mine was the directors, to be honest with you. We didn't know how the different directors were going to play into this, and would the styles be too jarring? What would that look like? And I think we had this unique aspect from each one of them, but they all worked as a total body of work as well, even with the uniqueness of each director. And I think some of that goes to my next point of the writing. In general, I was very happy with the writing. It's always very concerning. Do you get the campy stuff that George Lucas was doing, or is it too serious? And so I thought they hit a pretty nice balance between what was, not serious enough for us that we liked that aspect of the story, was a little bit of humor and some of that. And so I think those were my 2 ones, but really the directors and how they worked throughout the show was, it was more of my relief, but it definitely exceeded my expectations.
Yep. What single episode character would you like to see return in later seasons? I'm assuming from Mandalorian season 1 and not other series.
Yeah. I don't really know, because the one character I would have liked to see more of, I think, is dead. The dude that sold him out with the job that they pulled.
The kid? Yeah,
the older dude with the beard.
The older dude with the beard.
It was in when they do the heist job on the New Republic ship.
Yeah. Well, we don't know. He may not be dead, but
yeah, maybe not. But I like that character a lot for some reason.
Yeah, Fennec Shan comes to mind. IG-11. He's a droid. Maybe they reprogram him, or they take his mind is still alive and do that.
Or another IG unit in general.
Yeah, but I think that's all fair. And then Omera, I think I want to see her again in season 2.
All right. And then the question everybody wants to know: how is that toilet on the Razor Crest supposed to work? It looks very uncomfortable.
Yeah, hocus pocus, mumbo jumbo. That's what I had for my answer.
Yep, it's door logic. Star Wars door logic. That's all you need to know. All right, let's keep moving along here.
Let's see. What do you think Moff Gideon's final goal is? What do you think of him trying to emulate Vader and get midichlorians from the child?
I'm assuming that last question is, you mean inject himself?
Yes.
Midichlorian? Oh. Yeah,
so this, and I'm glad, this is from Sam G on, is it Discord? Are we on Discord?
Yep.
Okay. So Sam G, yeah, I'm glad he brought this up. There was, in, what was it? Not Rebel Assault. Was it, Jedi Order? Well, it was one of the games that one of the video games, this is a Legends video game, but that was what they were trying to do. They were trying to inject themselves with midichlorians to have force powers. If you think of it, that's the ultimate power, right? If you can become a Jedi, then I think it's Jedi Outcast. Now it just clicked. Jedi Outcast.
Yeah, that sounds right.
They were trying to inject themselves with midichlorians and find a way to kind of replicate force powers, become force sensitive, if you will, by just doing that. And maybe that's where all it's coming from. We've talked about, it's midichlorians to save Palpatine or rebuild Snoke or whatever that is. It could just be selfishly Gideon saying, I've got a darksaber, the Empire's in ruins, someone needs to lead, I know about the Force, I know about the powers, and I'm trying to make this happen. Who knows? That could be possible.
Yeah, the Star Wars equivalent of a super soldier serum.
Yes.
Yeah. What's his final goal? I have a feeling that he is probably working for Snoke.
Yeah,
I'm going to go with that it does tie in with the larger story. Even if we don't necessarily see it, that's my headcanon for right now.
Yeah, I had just that he's a loyalist in some way, that he's carrying out the orders of, maybe it's some sub-order of Operation Cinder, right? Or something, who knows? But he's still loyal to them.
Right. What would be the worst realistic cameo that you could see happening in this show?
Zeb Aurelius.
Oh my God.
Just because of CGI, the CG for that would be kind of crazy to have to do. But I don't know. I don't really have, this one was hard. Like I can make an argument for everybody being in this series, and so they always trying to think, okay, what would look weird or be off-putting unless they threw a ton of money at it to actually make it work. I think anybody that we know, like a Leia or a Luke or Han, whoever it is, that becomes, it's going to be offsetting as well because the technology is just still not there. We can definitely see it, and I think it's going to stick out like even more of a sore thumb on a TV show as opposed to what we saw even in the movies.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I'm not really a big fan of Boba Fett coming in this thing at all. And I think that's, is it realistic? I don't know. It seems to float around quite a bit.
Yeah.
And I'm with you. If Luke or Leia were to show up, I think that would be a disservice to the show. And I would prefer not to. We can have references to them, but I'd really not like to see it. And are they realistic though? I guess is the question. I don't know. We speculate enough and there's a lot of interest around it. So I'm going to go with that. That's potentially realistic, at least from what the fans want. So go from there. All right. This is the one you've been looking for. So I'm going to ask it for you. What deep cut reference would you like to see that we haven't seen yet?
Deep cut reference. Was this the one? I don't think it was here. I probably can work it into this question. Maybe we skipped it.
I don't know, but this is like right up your alley. What deep cut that no one's ever heard of that we'll quickly forget once you tell us do you want to see?
Oh, I didn't.
Jar Jar.
Jar Jar. No.
Knock it off.
No. I mean, I wouldn't mind, but it's not really a deep cut. So I think a deep cut is like so relative to what you know about Star Wars. Like, you know what I mean? Yeah. Like if you're just the average watcher of Disney Plus, that Darksaber came out, you're like, cool. So what? But for somebody like us, like, and a little bit, and we're already down to the very last couple of questions, but well, I'll save it. But yeah, it was a big deal for me, right? Seeing the Darksaber come out and all that. So I think it's all relative to what your level of experience or level of familiarity with Star Wars is. I think I'm going to go back to it. I know, I'm sorry, it's probably so on the surface, but I do like the idea of Mortis and tracing of the Jedi, going back, I think Lor Santeca and all the work that he was doing for working with Luke Skywalker. I think all of that would be really great and would play into him trying to find the quote sorcerers that are out there. He's got to start somewhere. He's got to find traces to follow. And so I think a lot of that would be really cool to play in. Before we move on, though, the one thing that I was saying earlier about the Mandalorians and what happened to them, I think if you have somebody like the Death Watch folks, I've envisioned that at some point when the Empire came over and purged the Mandalorians, those loyalists to the Empire came back and said, "Hey, remember us? We're with you." And my gut tells me that the Empire said, "You're dead too," and attacked them and humbled them at that point, like. Because they really weren't loyal to the man. They kept the Mandalorians around and had people like Gar Saxon put in place to keep them in check. But they really, if they had their whims and had their ways, they would have eradicated the Mandalorians. They're just a thorn in their side, right? They don't want another powerful, and they know what they're capable of doing. So I think those loyalists came back, like Death Watch and the crazy people that were following Darth Maul. And I think the Empire slammed them down, killed them, tried to kill them, made them part of the purge, if you will, as well. And they had a big dose of humble pie. And so I think that's why you see them now that, yeah, okay, we made some really bad decisions and we're all kind of in the same boat together, that we're the last of what's left of Mandalore, whether we had our differences or not. We all know now that the Empire didn't like us. And I think that's what he's going to use to kind of help build Mandalore all up again.
Yeah. And Twan actually had a Jason Syndulla reference there as his deep cut, which is pretty good. I'm going to go back. I've said this before in other circles, I guess. I really like the Republic Commando books. I would love to see any of those characters show up, even if it was by name, like Cal Skirata or any of these others. I think Cal Skirata would be a great one, actually, because he was a really older character and, was a teacher as well in a lot of ways. Mm-hmm. So I would like to see something like that. That's a reference from the books, and practically probably no one knows that. Very few. You hardcore people who love Legends might, but so that's kind of my deep cut, if you will.
Yeah. Last question here. Will we, or at least from this person, will we see someone else get carbon frozen this season?
I hope so. Actually, I kind of hope it's Mandalorian, to be honest with you. I think that would be an interesting twist.
That would be a twist. There, and this was, so if this is a spoiler, just cover your ears for 10 seconds, turn the volume down. But we know that someone gets unfrozen from season 1. And that was not officially announced, but there's things that are out there that you can see now that are, it's happening. So different twist there. I won't say who it is. Maybe it's not a spoiler. Okay, quickly, we got 2 questions left. Let's see. With HasLab Razor Crest, so this is Hasbro. Hasbro Laboratories released a Razor Crest toy. It's part of a GoFundMe or not GoFundMe. What is it called? I don't know. It's one of those things where they reach certain goals and they add more and more things to them. Anyways, with HasLab Razor Crest, they revealed the escape pod feature for the ship. Do you think we will see something like that in season 2? Do you think it'll be used in season 2?
Right, and this question was on Instagram from R2 Wickco, so thanks for the question.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see why not. We saw this with the Millennium Falcon with Solo. We didn't, we saw it at Jettison, so will it play a major part in it? I wouldn't go that far, but will we see it? Will we see it be used? I think that's pretty reasonable, so why not? The thing to remember, though, about the HasLab stuff, what are these called, like the Pulse things? These are like the Mega Fan type of toys, if you will, more premium toys that Hasbro does, higher quality, larger scale, things like that.
Yep.
Some of that might be to fill out details. So I think we temper expectations a little bit, but if we see it in a toy, I think it's a fair shake that we're going to see it on screen because they usually have some sort of reference for some of this stuff. Not all of it, but some of it. So I'm going to go ahead and say, I think we'll see a escape pod used.
And I will go so far. So I was saving this for the prediction show, the final hype show that we're going to do here in 2 weeks. 2 weeks? Yeah, 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks. I don't know, whenever it is. But I was saving this for that. But I'll tease it here and I'll expound upon it a little bit later. But I think we definitely see him use the escape pod, and I think we have a death in season 2, and I think it's the Razor Crest, temporarily death. And I say that because that scene, and we talked about this already, and again, I'm just expanding on a theory that I had from seeing the trailer. If you go back and listen to the trailer show that we did, the breakdown of that ship is in no condition. It is completely battered, completely almost destroyed, and it's coming into orbit of that planet. And then we saw that fiery thing come down. I think that thing is Dunsky. I think it's done. I think that's why it crashes into the water. I think that's why you see the child and the Mandalorian on a boat if those two scenes are together. But I think before that happens, I think they bail together. And I think I envision him holding the child in an escape pod that looks very similar like to the one that we saw in The Last Jedi that Rey went in out of the Millennium Falcon. I think that's going to be a really cool and powerful shot if you see him holding the child and the child looking around and wondering like what's about to happen, and that thing jettisons in the Razor. Now the Razor Crest I think comes back, but I think it's out of commission for most of the season. So
yep, I like it.
That'd be a good way to introduce it if that's the case. And they're called backers. Thank you, Dale. I don't know what we'd do without you. All right, let's see. Is that no? We got one last question. This is from LinkedIn, which I had no idea we were even doing LinkedIn. Mike did this years ago, and so thank you, Mark Edwards, for following us there.
You made us feel really professional for once,
right?
So we apologize for that.
Doesn't happen often.
Yeah, LinkedIn. There you go.
And this is a question that was shared by Utini as well. What was your favorite moment of season 1, Jonesy?
Ooh, this is tough. There were probably a few. It's really hard to ignore the child's reveal because that was just such a shock, and they kept it under wraps so well.
Yep.
But I gotta be honest though, man, the fights in the very last episode, especially with the armor, I mean, I don't know. That just got the blood pumping. It was just a lot of fun. There were so many great moments within the whole series, the whole season. It's really difficult to pick one, but I'd probably have to settle on the child and the reveal of that, and maybe some of the the first time he uses the Force. I think those were two just huge moments that can't be ignored, and it took us off. It took us all of us off guard a little bit because we just didn't expect to see this stuff in the show.
Yep. Favorite moment for me, it's a toss up. It's a toss up between the final moment of episode 1, which is the reveal of the child, as I was jaw dropping. But the one that I felt like was just slightly above, because I like Rebels, was the Darksaber. Because the amount of questions that I have and still have to this day, and we'll get to this when we talk about speculation, but knowing where, so what happened to it? Where the heck is Bo-Katan? Are we going to see her in season 2? Right. I mean, we'll talk about this again on the final hype episode about other characters we've not really mentioned that we potentially could see and why it would make sense for us to see them if they decide to go that way. But and then again, my mind at least tends to go with, okay, so they've introduced this, so it's got to mean something. What does it mean? The logical steps for me is at some point they're showing you this is a weapon that used to belong to Mandalorians. You have somebody called the Mandalorian. It is the Mandalorian show. It's going to go back into his hands. And if that's the case, then whoever wields that is the true ruler of Mandalore. And that, again, feeds into that whole theory about him rebuilding this and rebuilding the creed and all that in his own way, in his own design at this point. So again, it just opened up so many questions for me, and that I had that it's hard to say that it wasn't my favorite moment.
So what I like about that too, Albert, is that I got so many questions from casual fans that wanted to know what the heck it was. And it gave me an opportunity to say, well, and unveil all this other knowledge and all this other story that goes behind it and all the other cool things that we had seen in Rebels, and, shows that some people were kind of aware of, but maybe didn't watch it. Not everybody likes to watch the quote unquote children's shows, right?
Yes.
Or they don't have it on their TV and things like that. So I liked that it brought in, it allowed us to enlighten and kind of help other people build their knowledge of the total franchise rather than just kind of what they're seeing here. And they probably didn't go watch it or anything like that, but that they were exposed to it and knew that there was stuff behind it and that we might actually learn a lot more about it. They got them excited and it got me excited that they were excited. So I really liked that aspect of the Darksaber that just blew everyone's mind. Is it a lightsaber? Is it, all these cool discussions that we had with it.
Right. You have to be like, really cool kid too, because you got to explain all this and say, oh, well, sit right down. Let me tell you a tale of the Darksaber. Like Fenrir did at some point in Rebels. Yeah, and just if we can pause real quick, Howard. So we do have a couple other favorite moments in the chat. I thought would be cool to pull out. So Will's was when IG-11's self-sacrifice. He almost had him in tears. There's no shame in admitting that. We know you were in tears. And Jeremiah favorite moments was IG-11's amazing kick butt. Yeah, you went and highlighted again. Kick butt entrances. Yeah, he had 2, which was fantastic. The guy just gets all the stage and all the showtime. Which is why I think we need to have him back in season 2. And it's not uncommon, right? These IG units would blow themselves up, and they would have, and again, I'm going to wax legends, but they would blow themselves up, but their memories and their core units and stuff were stored somewhere else, so they could just go into another body and take over and be, IG-11 or IG whatever all over again. So
and we have this in the comic. We have this in canon comic with IG-88 that he was always planning ahead. Yeah, that's right. He was planning ahead. So what's to say that IG-11 didn't have a head back at Quill's, home base, if you will?
Possible. It's possible.
It's possible. We need that sound clip from Mark Hamill.
We do. Yeah.
I love it.
All right. I think that's it. I think we got through all the questions in pretty good time. I mean, went a little bit over, but
missed your question or we kind of glossed over it. I apologize. We're trying to keep the show relatively in check here, but appreciate everyone taking the time to do that on all the different services. It was really cool to see pretty much all the services got used to send us send us questions, including LinkedIn apparently, which is mind-boggling.
So thanks again, Mark, for doing that. All right, we got to announce the winner of the October. Is it October? No, it was September's T-shirt. So this went to Fando. This is GM2187, the guy that said that sometimes he feels like he could be a consultant for us. So he's been following the show forever. So thank you, and I'm glad you finally won a T-shirt. So
it's almost like you're part of the crew.
Yeah,
we are part of the crew. We love you, GM2187.
I'll get that. I haven't placed the order yet, and I apologize. Just been kind of busy with a couple other things, but I will get that ordered for you and sent to you. So send us a picture once you've had a chance to throw that on.
Okay, here's the one everyone wants to know, though. Who was the winner?
Yes, so who was the winner of episode 346? So the question says, hi, a Mando or maybe general Star Wars question I have kicking around. The client says, is the galaxy safer now? Or something along that line. What do y'all think about that? It seems like they are in a state of dystopia, but wouldn't the era of the Empire also be dystopian? Was the High Republic the de facto period of normalcy for the galaxy, and it all unraveled from Order 66 onward? So this was given to us by Fan Solo. So thank you for that submission. So we will take that, turn it into an episode 346, and we may just call it that. Is the galaxy safer now? Right? I think that's probably what I'm going to run with for the show title. So thank you for doing that. If not, then we'll call it the Fan Solo Show. How about that?
But kind of actually oddly appropriate.
It really is, Fan Solo.
Yeah, so, we got to speculate a little bit on this a couple of episodes ago, so it's going to be fun to be able to go in there and have a little more time to really dig into it. So great question. Thank you.
Yeah, great question. All right, that is going to do it for this episode. We'll be back next week with the Weapons Are Part of My Religion episode. So we're going to dig into some legends and some canon weapons that the Mandalorians used, because we know that he's going to fight Gideon with the Darksaber. So how is he going to equip himself? What is he going to be able to use? Whether or not he actually digs into this stuff, I thought it'd be just fun to, since we're kind of riding the wave of Mandalorians, that we take a look retrospectively at some of the weapons that they've used in canon and Legends and just have fun with it. So hopefully that'll be of interest to you guys. All right. Anything else before we get out of here?
No, great show. Thanks everyone for all the questions. We really do appreciate it. You guys make it all worthwhile for us. We really do appreciate it.
Yes, and thank you everybody that joined us for the live show tonight, especially some of the questions and the feedback and going back and forth. That was really great and fun to watch. So hopefully you guys are getting as much out of that as we are. So with that, we will see you guys next week.
You're still listening? Wow, that's amazing. Well, I'm here to give you the disclaimer. Normally we do a big, long, drawn-out disclaimer thing saying what's what and who's what and all that other stuff, but I think you guys kind of know that Lucasfilm and Disney have no affiliation with us at all, and we have none with them. We talk about Star Wars, which is their property and all that other good, fun stuff, but I think you can tell which is our stuff and which is their stuff. If you can't, well, then send a lawyer to send an email to me, and I'll be glad to chat with them. Other than that, you know what's what, so that's your disclaimer.